Okay, in this lecture, I'm going to talk about Leibniz. Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz. That was his complete name. He lived from 1646 to 1716. He's been called the last of the universal geniuses. He invented calculus, so he was a great mathematician. He invented calculus. In fact, for a long time, there was a big dispute between Leibniz, over whether Leibniz has plagiarized calculus from Newton. And after years of examination, it eventually turned out that he didn't. I mean, he invented calculus on his own. So Leibniz was a great mathematician. He invented calculus. He was he's been called the inventor of modern formal linguistics. He invented a calculus. He invented a primitive computer, so you could call him the father of the computer. He was a military strategist and a great physicist, a great philosopher, so he was a universal genius. Today I want to talk about, he was German. Let me say he was German, but he wrote his stuff, he wrote in French. So in Latin, let me talk about his view of substance. We started with Aristotle on substance, and then we went to Descartes. I talked about Locke and Spinoza on substance. So now today I'm going to talk about Leibniz's view of substance. The idea of substance, as I mentioned before, was introduced by Aristotle. Aristotle said that what is really real is substance, and by substance he meant that which does not depend upon anything else. So, example, a horse would be a substance. The color of the horse, the shape of the horse, the size of the horse, and so on would be properties of the substance. Aristotle believed that there were many, many different types of substances. He called them natural forms. There were different types of trees. These are substances. Dogs would be a substance. A different substance than a dog would be different from a cat, would be different from a horse. So for Aristotle, there are many different types of substances. And a substance for Aristotle is a combination of matter and form. So the matter takes on a certain form. The form of a horse is different from the form of a dog. That's why we can distinguish between them. So for Aristotle, and when it comes to the human being, for example, a human being for Aristotle is a substance, and it's a substance composed of matter and form. And for Aristotle, the form of the human body, the form of a person, is what he calls the soul. So the soul for Aristotle exists only in the substance of a human being. So when the human being dies, the soul dies, because the soul is the form of the substance. Okay, so Aristotle did not distinguish, the soul, as Plato did. For example, for Plato, the soul is distinct from the body. When the body dies, the soul lives on. For Aristotle, the soul is the form of the body, so when the body dies, the form dies also. When we get to Descartes, there are three substances. There's God, an infinite substance. And this infinite substance, God, is a perfect being. And God created finite substances. And he created two types of finite substances, matter and mind. Matter and soul, or matter and spirit. So matter and mind. So whereas Aristotle had many different types of forms, horses and dogs and cats and trees, Descartes only has one form to describe all of material life. He calls it matter. So Descartes does not see horses as a form. He doesn't see cats as a form distinct from horses. He doesn't see dogs as distinct from cats. They are all made out of matter. They're matter. That's it. So the problem with Descartes is how to get the two together, which he never did. I mean, he was never able to get them to interact, and yet he believed that they had to interact at some point, but he was never able to get them together. He proposed that they interact in the pineal gland of the brain, but that didn't make any sense, because by definition, forms do not interact, and no one took that seriously. So that was like a dead end. Now, when we come to John Locke, Locke accepted Descartes' distinction between mind and matter. Unlike Descartes, though, Descartes thought he actually knew the essence of both. The essence of mind was thought or consciousness, and the essence of matter was extension in space. Locke did not believe. Locke believed that there were these two substances existed, matter and mind, but he didn't believe we could know their essence, because he didn't believe we knew what they were. They were just that which underlied, or was the foundation for properties. So, for example, material substances would be that which underlies the color and the sound and the properties that we see, the shape and so on. And when it comes to immaterial substances, the soul, for example, that which underlies our thoughts and feelings and so on, but we never had direct access to them. So whereas Descartes actually believed we knew the essence of mind and matter, Locke did not believe we knew their essence. So if you asked Locke what an apple was, the substance of an apple, he would just say, it's something I know not what. Whereas Descartes would actually give an answer. He wouldn't say it's something I don't know what. He would say the essence of matter is extension, and the essence of the soul is consciousness. Okay, so Descartes, Locke. Who else should I mention? Locke, Spinoza. Oh, and Spinoza. I talked about Spinoza last time. Spinoza accepts the terminology of substance. He studied Descartes as a young man, eventually, and so he became an expert in the Cartesian system of Cartesian dualism. But eventually, what Spinoza did was to reject Cartesian dualism, between finite matter and mind, and then this infinite God. For Spinoza, there's only one substance, and that's God or nature, Deus sive natura, all the same for Spinoza. Spinoza believed in God, but what type of God he believed in is anybody's guess. Some people say he's a pantheist, some people say he's an atheist. There's a lot of disagreement as to exactly what Spinoza meant by God, whether he could be said to believe in God in any meaningful way whatsoever, or it was just a kind of a crypto-atheist, or some people believe he was actually religious sensibility. It's that's a debate for a different time. But Spinoza anyway believed that there was one substance, had infinite attributes, only two of which we know, mind and matter. Okay, now when we come to, I gave you the reasons in the last lecture why he believed that. Now when we come to Leibniz believes there are infinite substances. That's amazing. If you ask Leibniz, ask Descartes how many substances are there, he would say 3. There's one infinite substance and 2 finite substances. If you ask Spinoza, he would say there's one. If you ask Leibniz how many substances are, he would say there are infinite substances. Okay, now, wow, that's really weird, because Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz were all rationalists. They all believe that beginning with certain indubitable premises, if you reason deductively, step by step, you'll come up with the truth. And yet they all begin with the concept of substance, and yet end up with totally distinct metaphysical views. This is going to lead Locke later on to say, well, there's something going wrong here, because everybody's coming up with totally different metaphysical systems. Maybe the problem is that the mind is going beyond its limits. It's trying to figure out things that it cannot figure out. So Locke wanted to kind of draw back from these metaphysical speculations and limit everything to being based upon experience. Anyway, so let me explain why Leibniz believed there are infinite substances. Beginning with Descartes' view that you have mind and matter, this is the problem. For Leibniz, the complex things are made out of simple things. So what you want to do is to break down complex objects into their simple components, and when you get down to the simplest components, that will be the substance out of which everything else is built. Okay, that makes sense. And Leibniz argues this: if you break everything down into its simplest components, you're going to end up with, call them atoms. But if they're the simplest atoms, the simplest thing, call them atomic, whatever they are, you can't break them up any further. But if they are material, you can break them up any further. the substances that exist cannot be material because for Leibniz, the substances are the simplest components of reality. They cannot be broken up further. But anything that is material, and here he agrees with Descartes, anything that is material has extension because material things by definition are extended in space. So if these ultimate components of reality, these substances, are material, that means they have extension in space, and anything that is extended in space can be split. So the substances, the simplest components of reality cannot be material. They have to be immaterial. And the only other alternative in Leibniz's day was if they're not matter, they must be mind, meaning they must be conscious. So basically what Leibniz says is that there are infinite substances, and he called them monads. Monads. The tiniest particles of the reality are called monads. These are substances, but they are immaterial. They are mental. So Leibniz believes that reality is composed of these infinite immaterial substances, all of which are to some degree or other conscious. So, for example, this pen here, this marker, is composed of billions or whatever of immaterial substances called monads. Every monad in this pen, these atoms, but they're not physical, have some degree of consciousness. He called it perception. Now, they're not self-conscious in the way we are. They can't reflect on their consciousness, but they do have some minimal degree of consciousness. Okay, so basically Leibniz believes that the world is alive. There are no dead things in the world. Every little particle is alive with some type of perception. And these are monads. And I'll talk about more in the next lecture a little further because I'm not going to have time in this lecture to get into the details. But that's Leibniz's view. He doesn't, and now this is, whereas Descartes has, you have material substances and immaterial substances. For Leibniz is an idealist, and idealism is going to be very important. Leibniz does not believe in matter. You can say, well, that's really weird. Leibniz is not stupid. Whatever, as Bertrand Russell said, whatever the truth about reality is going to be, it's going to look crazy. It will look weird. So there's no to say that something is weird, as Russell said, it's not a objection to the theory, because the way reality actually turns out, it's going to be weird. Just think of quantum physics in the last 100 years. Quantum physics is weird. As Richard Feynman said, anyone who claims to understand quantum physics does not understand it because the human mind can understand it. When Newton proposed gravity, he said that was crazy. How can the moon affect the tides when there's nothing, when there's just empty space between them? And Newton said, it's crazy. It's a crazy idea. It doesn't make any sense. So he said, but that's the way it is. Hypothesis non fingo. That I just tell you, I describe what is the fact. I don't explain it. So what Leibniz does is there's this infinite number of immaterial substances. Take the human body, for example. We are composed of billions or trillions of these immaterial monads, but the controlling monad of the human being is what we call our soul. So my soul, for example, if I decide to raise my arm, there are millions and billions of monads, or these immaterial substances, in my arm and my hand, but they are subordinate to my mind. My mind can tell my hand what to do. My hand doesn't tell my brain what to think. My brain tells my mind tells my hand and arm. So anyway, that's Leibniz. It's an amazing metaphysical view. And Leibniz has a very interesting way of working it out, of how these monads work. I mean, for example, going back to Descartes couldn't get the mind and the body together because there are two substances interacting. How can matter influence mind, or mind matter? For Leibniz, there's no Cartesian problem there because there is no such thing as matter. Matter doesn't exist. So you don't have a mind-body problem. Every atom, every monad of the mind is mental. So for Leibniz, there is no problem of interaction between material substances and immaterial substances. So Anyway, that's all I'm going to say in this video. But the main thing I want to emphasize today is that where Spinoza has one substance, God or nature, Leibniz comes up with infinite amount of substances, and they're both pursuing the same rationalistic project.